organization. Joining me now in New York is Colonel Michael Kay, former advisor of the UK Ministry of Defense. What did you make of that when you heard it last night? The Russians are now leading from the front and we're leading from behind?
No, Katie, well, firstly, thanks very much for having me on. It's lovely to see you again, Katie. I don't think that's the case at all, actually. I think we have a really interesting conundrum going on at the moment. The first thing I'd say is that I think, despite Putin having this reputation for being a big bear and an ex-KGB and all the rest of it, I actually think he's thrown the administration a bit of a lifeline. He's allowed Obama to save a little bit of face. He's allowed Obama to pursue some diplomatic opportunities without losing even more credibility, let's say, as we move forward. There are still lots of issues here in terms of a lack of foreign policy across Iran, Syria, Egypt, and the whole region, to be honest. But I think at the moment, let's focus on where we're at. There is now a real opportunity for the United Nations Security Council to draft something that it's been trying to approve for the last 2 years, and that is a Security Council resolution under Chapter 6, which is non-military sanctions through the international community of getting Assad to give up chemical weapons and mandate their destruction and prohibit their production with international monitoring. Now, I think that's something that we've got to seize upon as the West. We've been trying to do this for 2 years. Let's get something on the table. Let's get it agreed by the Permanent Five, China and Russia, who have said that they're on side to actually signing this, and let's move forward. How we actually go about monitoring, getting Assad to turn over the chemical weapons, how we make sure that actually is affected, I think is an incredibly important conversation, but it's not the conversation for the moment. Let's get the strategy in place, and then let's work out how we actually achieve that strategy in a month's time.
One of the debates is whether, and the President said this, as has Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense, that the United States' threat of the use of force in Syria is what brought this whole thing about, that if the United States hadn't talked about and been clear that it was going to have some kind of a punishment or deterrence for Assad, some kind of American military strike, the Syrians wouldn't be willing to do this and the Russians wouldn't have proposed it. But what the President did last night was he took that option off the table. He didn't take it off the table, but he said, we're going to pause. I'm not coming to Congress to ask them to approve military force, an attack on Syria. I'm going to put that on hold. We're going to let the diplomatic proposals play out. Do you think that was the right thing to do?
I think it's a fantastic point you make, and this is kind of my view on this. I was having a conversation with a very close source last night about this, and I think the threat of military force was at its most prominent in the very first few days after the attack took place. I think the threat of military action in the eyes of Assad and in the eyes of the region then started to diminish as support slowly subsided. So what I mean by that is David Cameron's motion overturned by Parliament.
Right.
So then one of the strongest allies of America has then said, look, we don't think there's enough evidence here, or for the reasons of Iraq or whatever, we decided not to go in on this. And then Obama decided to, and I think rightly so, give Congress the vote. So I think from day one, the threat of military strikes has subsided. So I'm curious, and I'm not sure whether the threat of military action did bring Putin to the table or not. So it's something which I think the jury's still out for me in terms of how that actually came about. I think the really interesting thing at the moment is I think the President had no choice but to delay the vote by Congress. Because the moment we have this dilemma and this conundrum that France and the US seem to be pushing for, and the UK actually, in terms of a Chapter 7, Article 42 UN Security Council resolution, which is obviously the up to and including the use of force across air, land and maritime forces. Now, I think there's going to be a really interesting situation here from the White House perspective is that if for whatever reason Russia and China buy into that, personally, I don't think they will, but if they do buy into that, and then the President puts the vote to Congress, and Congress turn around and say, actually, we're still not convinced about military strikes, you're kind of going to have the reverse problem that we've had. You're going to have international legitimacy, but you're not going to have agreement from Congress on a military strike. Whereas before, we've been lacking legitimacy, and obviously the White House has wanted to strike. So I think there's an interesting conundrum there that we've got to see, or the administration will have to think very carefully about how that plays out. So at the moment, if I was the administration, I'd be pushing for a Chapter 6. I'd want to get something on the table, something agreed, something graduated, something that had regional and international backing, and then see how the actual means of monitoring those chemical weapons coming into international hands played out, and then have the conversation on whether we need to upgrade that to a Chapter 7, Article 42, if required.
Okay, well, that's Lieutenant Colonel Michael Kay, former special advisor to the British Ministry of Defense.
Thanks,
and I have a feeling that we're going to have some answers 24 hours from now, so stay tuned.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much.